Hello, welcome back. Let's get started. There's new information in the case of Idaho versus Bryan Kohberger that I wanted to talk about. A lot of this information is very positive for the prosecution. Allegedly, Bryan Kohberger messaged one of his victims. The article states that weeks before the students were murdered, Bryan Kohberger used his Instagram account to message one of the victims multiple times. The source told People magazine that Bryan's first message was sent in October. His message was said to basically say, "Hey, how are you?" No reply, so he sent the same message again. It said that his account followed all three of the female victims. This is good information for the case against Bryan Kohberger. If it is true that Bryan messaged one of the victims, not only is that a connection between him and the victims, but it could also be his motive. But do they really have a motive? So let's look back at the affidavit. Remember how it stated that Bryan Kohberger's phone was in the King Road residence area 12 times prior to the murders? In one of those occasions, on August 21st, 2022, Bryan's phone used cell towers that covered the King Road residence from approximately 10:34 p.m. to 11:35 p.m. At 11:37 p.m. that same day, Kohberger was pulled over by Latah County Sheriff's Deputy CPL Duke at a location consistent with cellular resources that provide coverage with Farm Road and Pullman Highway. He was pulled over on a day where his phone records spent an hour at the King Road residence area. Body camera and everything. Amazing evidence. But if he tried to contact one of the victims in October and was outside their house for an hour in August, that is chilling. Especially if he had no prior contact with any of the residents. A People's Magazine reporter stated that they viewed the now deleted Instagram account before it was removed. His alleged account followed the accounts of Maddie, Kaylee, and Zaina. The article goes on to state it's unclear why Kohberger didn't get a response to his messages, but authorities say that the victim may have missed them completely. She may not even have seen them because they went into message requests, says the investigative source. Instagram users are not notified when they receive a message from someone they do not follow back, and the messages go into a special folder. We're still trying to determine how aware the victims were of his existence. There's no indication that he was getting frustrated with her lack of a response, the source adds, but he was definitely persistent. This leads me to wonder, who was his target? Why did he kill more than his intended target? Why did he even kill at all? Where did he first see his target? Did he have a prior relationship of any kind with his target? As of right now, we have little information to go on, but there is a story that is starting to add up. If you watch a lot of crime shows, you probably know that statistically, you are in more danger when you plan on leaving a relationship. But a psychopath that you don't even know, it's a lot harder to tell when you are in serious danger. So let's create a timeline. Bryan Kohberger moved to Washington in August. We know this because not only did he start school at WSU in August, but an interview with his neighbor, Aaron Dash, corroborates that Bryan moved into his apartment in August. The article states that Bryan moved into the complex in August and was Dash's upstairs neighbor. Classes for WSU started on August 22nd, 2022. So we know Bryan was most likely moving or moved into his apartment probably at least a week prior. Here's the kicker. Bryan was pulled over on August 21st, 2022. He was in the Moscow, Idaho area. Specifically, his phone was using cell towers that provided cell service to the King Road, Moscow, Idaho residents. The location where he was pulled over was 1.7 miles away from the King Road home. Was he scoping this area out even before he started school? We know at this time that there is no way he could have had a relationship with anyone in the house, romantic or friendly. He just moved there. He literally just moved to the area in another state, in another town. What was he doing there? Unless he somehow had contact with someone from that house within the first 3 weeks of moving to Washington, he was in the area that his victims lived before he even met them. If he moved into his apartment in August, his dad was helping him move in, which would have taken at least a day to settle in. That means between August 2nd and August 21st, he probably found and started stalking his victims. If you do a Google search of sorority and fraternity houses in the area of Moscow, Idaho, you will see a cluster of houses located very close to Idaho State University. We know that on August 21st, Bryan's phone was pinging in this area. He was in fact there at this time because he was even pulled over. The affidavit states that Bryan Kohberger was pulled over at Pullman Road and Farm Road. Farm Road travels north away from the sorority and fraternity house cluster, but Farm Road connects to Perimeter Drive. Perimeter Drive is a road that is basically on the outskirts of town, a road that goes directly past Sigma Chi, directly to Farmhouse Fraternity. Then, if you turn south, take the next right, then left, you are at 1122 King Road residence. I believe his targeted demographic was young university women. The house and the women who lived there caught his eye. I don't know if he knew that 2 other women even lived there, but he knew of and watched Kaylee, Zaina, and Maddie. He watched them from the time he chose them and their house to the time he murdered them. When I heard about the DM, I wasn't so sure. I didn't know what to think. My first thought was amazing. They had a connection and possibly a motive. The more I think about the timeline, the creepier it gets. This is a man that was in his victim's area of residence weeks after he moved across country. If the DMs are true and he added and tried to communicate with his victims on Instagram, then this social media platform is most likely where he got the most information about the women from. Sadly, I wonder if Kaylee's last Instagram post was why he chose that night. Maybe he knew that Kaylee was back in the home for the night. Maybe he's seen that she was there through Instagram. He probably even knew that she had moved out, bought a new car, was going to graduate, and planned to move. He could have become especially infatuated with Kaylee, which is why when she came back to the house that night, he decided that is when he was going to do what he had been planning. We've seen this in the case of Stephen McDaniels and Laura Giddings. Stephen McDaniels had an infatuation with his neighbor and law degree classmate Lauren Giddings. When they both graduated, Lauren stayed in her apartment for a few weeks, planning to study for the bar exam before she moved. Stephen McDaniels, who had been secretly recording and watching her for months, killed her before she was able to leave her college apartment behind. Bryan Kohberger could have also seen it as the time to do what he was going to do because Kaylee was about to move. It's also possible that he chose this time because of his upcoming license plate change. Other factors that could have influenced his timing of attack was the lack of snow, his trip to Pennsylvania, and the upcoming holiday break. If he was planning this before he ever even moved to Washington, I'm actually very astonished by how much he messed up. It's almost unbelievable that he left the sheath. I thought maybe he thought he wiped it clean and was using it as a way to maybe implicate or point to someone else. But why would you even risk it just for that? Plus, he drove his vehicle around all over the area the night of the murder, which seems like something that you probably wouldn't want to do. Let's take a look at the items that were taken from Bryan's apartment via search warrant. One nitrate type black glove. Unless this glove had blood on it, this seems like a strange thing to take. Unless the police took this as evidence for the same reason they took the next two items. One Walmart receipt with a Dickies tag. Two Marshall's receipts. Very strange indeed, receipts and tags. This leads me to believe that they found Bryan Kohberger's evidence dumping ground, and they are trying to link the items found back to him. Dust container from a vacuum, 8 possible hair strands. I would assume that the possible hair strands came from the dust container for the vacuum. Possibly the vacuum Bryan used or was even seen using to clean out his car. One Amazon Fire TV stick with a cord plug. Surprisingly, you can browse the internet and play video games on Amazon Fire TV sticks, as well as stream movies and shows. This is most likely collected for digital forensics. One possible animal hair strand, 4 other possible hair strands. These 4 strands and 1 possible dog strand lead me to believe they were found separate from the other 8 possible hair strands. One computer tower, collected for digital forensic analysis. One collection of a dark red spot, collected without testing. This red spot is most likely on something that was removable. The spot is most likely very small since a presumptive blood test was not conducted on it. 2 cuts from an encased pillow with reddish brown stains. 1 stain tested. Top and bottom of a mattress cover with multiple stains. 1 stain tested. These reddish brown stains are most likely blood and will be tested for DNA. In the list of items to recover from Bryan Kohberger's apartment, number 8 includes indication of residence in or ownership or possession of the premises and any of the above items, including mail, receipts, identification, bills, rental agreements, licensing documents, and other personal property whose owner, possessor may be readily determined. The warrant seizure documentation states that before the search of Bryan's apartment, the weapon had not been located, which means since it is not listed in the evidence collected, it most likely still has not been located. This may be why they were collecting receipts or had a specific interest in receipts that would show ownership, possibly of the clothes that he might have been wearing or the weapon. Officer Payne also explains that he believes the murder appears to be planned ahead of time. rather than a crime that happened in a moment of conflict. Which leads me to believe that he actually didn't know his victims. And he didn't really have a reason except that he was planning this.